The last few months I watched a big debate in the UN and especially Francesca Albanese. Mrs. Albanese is an Italian legal scholar and United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, a position that she held from 2022, and she is very well known for her work on human rights and has been critical for the Israelis' actions in Palestinian territories. But that's not just that. She was questioned the last few months about some of her actions and where she gets her money from. And we have a big personality in the United Nations, Mr. Hillel Neur, and I hope that I pronounce it correctly, that he made his claim that he doesn't trust Mrs. Albanese. And I will show you in this 6 months period what the major things that happened for Mrs. Albanese.
Israel is responsible for one of the cruelest genocides in modern history. At the same time, since October 2023, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has soared by 213% in US dollars, amassing $225.7 billion US dollars in market gains, including $67.8 billion in the last month alone. One people enriched, one people erased. Member states must impose a full arms embargo on Israel, suspend all trade agreements and investment relations.
The League of Arab States appreciates the Special Rapporteur for her bold and courageous report.
Anti-Semites are those who support the genocidal government.
Why does the genocide continue? Because it is profitable, says the report. The method used by US and European companies used to finance Hitler continues to be used today.
The attacks against Gaza is a genocidal war.
This regime understands no language but the language of force, not the language of law, nor the voice of civilized nations.
And I now call the United Nations Watch.
Mr. President, is today's report balanced? Israel is accused of genocide 68 times. Now, on October 7th, the world saw Hamas start a war by invading Israel, firing thousands of rockets, massacring 1,200 people, including families and little children in their homes. Hamas pledged to do it again. Israel has been fighting a just war against a terrorist army, which cynically embeds itself among civilians. Ms. Albanese, war is not genocide. But in your report, there's no war at all. It's only about Israel. We ask, why does your report never mention once the October 7th invasion and massacre, or even the word Hamas? Why does your report never once mention Hezbollah on October 8th? Joining Hamas's war, they began firing thousands of missiles at Israel. Why does your report never once mention the Islamic Republic of Iran, which armed and trained its proxies and orchestrated the attacks, which itself fired hundreds of missiles at Israel? They openly call for genocide against the Israeli people. Why didn't you find reason to mention them once? Distinguished delegates, this report is an inversion. Silence on aggressors openly pursuing genocide and demonization for a democracy defending its people from a multi-front war. Ms. Albanese, do you now understand why a Swiss university canceled your panel this week for lack of balance? Mr. President, on April 1st, you released the report of the UN investigation, which found that the rapporteur's trip in Australia was funded by external groups. Ms. Albanese, will you release the documentation? Who funded you?
We will continue then with the next speaker.
After this video, that was 6 months ago, we had a development by Mr. Neur department Mrs. Albanese works from, and he reported back in the UN Watch. This is a YouTube channel also, go and check it out please. and he had to say those things.
Hey everyone, it's Hillel Neuer, and I'm standing here in The Hague outside of Erasmus University's International Institute for Social Studies. And that's because this was the location for serious financial wrongdoing connected to the Hamas terrorist organization and Francesca Albanese. Today we're releasing a damning new report entitled Nothing to Hide, which reveals the fact that a UN report, buried in a UN report, confirmed that the United Nations and Francesca Albanese for the past 16 months were engaged in a massive cover-up over the fact that when she visited Australia and New Zealand in November 2023 to lobby against Israel, to lobby the New Zealand Sovereign Wealth Fund to divest from Israel, she was paid, her travel was paid by external groups, namely pro-Hamas lobby groups like the Australian Friends of Palestine, which hailed Yahya Sinwar for his inspiring words, like the Australian Palestine Network, which justified October 7th as it was happening, and other pro-Hamas groups. They funded her trip. For 16 months, they said that she didn't. Let me walk you through the timeline briefly. On March 28th, a UN committee of human rights experts, basically friends and colleagues of Francesca Albanese, finally acted on a complaint that we launched well over a year ago. And they did so because Albanese was coming up for renewal and many complaints were being filed by different governments. And the Human Rights Council needed a maneuver to justify reappointing her. So they suddenly asked this committee of her peers, these are her fellow rapporteurs who sign her statements, who are anti-Israel, who embrace Albanese, physically embrace her and tweet about it. They suddenly produced a report on March 28th saying that Albanese's fine. She has some tweets that some could interpret as anti-Semitic, but actually we spoke to her and she said she's not anti-Semitic. So nothing to worry about. The fact that she says America is subjugated by the Jewish lobby, that the wildfires in Los Angeles were somehow caused by Israel, other kinds of wild, ridiculous statements. We asked her and she said she's fine, she's not anti-Semitic, she respects the principles of integrity and honesty, and so everything is fine. So the report of March 28th, a committee of her peers who should have recused themselves, was a total whitewash. However, even this panel of Albanese's friends and fans had to acknowledge two damning things. Number one, her trip in November 2023 to Australia and New Zealand was funded by external groups in terms of her travel to multiple cities in Australia and New Zealand. They said the UN paid for her trip to Australia, but within Australia and New Zealand, external groups paid for it. And we presumably know who these external groups are because they wrote in November 2023 that they sponsored her trip, that they supported her trip. And these are the pro-Hamas groups that I mentioned. And it's all in our report. You could see it at unwatch.org. So for 16 months, the UN said, literally, the UN paid for the trip. Nobody else. The UN paid for the trip. Albanese kept saying it. She said, I have nothing to hide. The UN funded my travel. The UN Human Rights Office said it. Secretary General's office said they have nothing to do with it, when in fact they're the ones who oversee the expenses, their division in Geneva. So we were basically told lies and cover up for 16 months. New UN report reveals what we complained about initially was true. External groups. So our report demands an investigation. We need to know exactly which groups funded Albanese's travel, which of these pro-Hamas groups, how much they paid. Now, why am I standing outside of Erasmus University's International Institute for Social Studies? Because here is where Albanese's research assistant was operating a corrupt scheme. Sarah Troyan is her name, Troian, look it up. She was a research fellow here, and she was Albanese's assistant. And she was the one who would issue invoices to external donors. So the money was coming through here. And I was just in the Dutch Foreign Ministry giving them a letter to their foreign minister to examine about this illicit funding. Which groups? Albanese has spoken at dozens of places, and we assume that she was getting funding for many of these trips, not just the one in Australia. Now, the second thing that the report on March 28th reveals, again, these are Albanese's own friends and colleagues, including the nutcase, Dr. Tlaleng Mofo Kang, who called me an evil scum white man who uses the F word all the time. She's the special rapporteur on health. She was part of this panel. Even they, who embrace Albanese, They acknowledged, number two, that Albanese was issuing honoraria. Now, you all know the ridiculous story of Rabbi Linda Goldstein. This is a fake parody account that is making fun of the absurd anti-Zionist Jews who embrace Hamas. And Linda Goldstein claims to be the chief rabbi of Gaza. There are no Jews in Gaza. They were all removed 20 years ago. The only Jews who are there are those being tortured in the dungeons of Hamas, the Israelis who were kidnapped. But there's a fake account, a parody account called Rabbi Linda Goldstein. It's a very funny account. And Rabbi Linda Goldstein, this fake account, sent an actual email to Albanese's office about a year ago saying, we're having a protest encampment in Columbia University. We need you to speak. We'll give you an honorarium. And Albanese's office, her research assistant, Eleonora De Martin, if I'm getting the name right, a student here at Erasmus University, wrote, Albanese wants to know about the honorarium, how much money. And although she's prohibited from taking money, but you can send the money to the Institute and it'll fund the work of her research fellow, Sarah Troyan, who accompanied and enabled Albanese to Australia, to the UN and other trips. So the whole thing is sort of an illicit scheme. She can't take the money, but they'll send the money to her research assistant. And all of this was happening here. So even this UN report acknowledged this was, quote, inappropriate. So imagine Albanese's best friends, they tweet, we love you, and all these other expressions of solidarity. Even they acknowledged that this use of honoraria, basically getting money for her talks as a UN expert, is wrong. So we're demanding an independent investigation, not a UN body. It's all going to be a cover-up. Calling on the member states. I was just in the Dutch Foreign Ministry, calling on the United States, France, the UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, and other decent countries to support an independent investigation to this illicit financial wrongdoing happening at the United Nations. It was headquartered here at Erasmus University, but is ongoing with Francesca Albanese. Check out our new report. It's on our website, unwatch.org. It's called Nothing to Hide. She said, I have nothing to hide. Turns out she was hiding a lot of wrongdoing for the past 16 months. Thank you for your support and stay tuned.
But this wasn't the end for it. Mr. Noor continued talking about Mrs. Albanese, and he showed what her background was and what her agenda was in that period. And this clip is from 4 months ago, and he talked especially for her.
Who is Francesca Albanese? She is the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine. It means she's supposed to be an investigator to speak out on human rights in Palestine. In fact, she only condemns Israel. Actually, the details of the position, it says to investigate Israel's violations. So actually, the job the UN gave her is to investigate only Israel. And they picked her because she's the most vitriolic hater of Israel, and that's who they wanted. And they gave her a UN title, UN immunity. She goes around the world, and she says Hamas is legitimate resistance. She says openly anti-Semitic things that you would see from a neo-Nazi. She says America is subjugated by the Jewish lobby. America subjugated by the Jewish lobby. That's straight out of a sort of white supremacist, neo-Nazi, Adolf Hitler vocabulary. And she's a UN expert. It's really shocking. When she was appointed on April 1st, 2022, we objected, we made the case, but they picked her because that's what they wanted. And over the past 3 years, she has repeatedly legitimized Hamas violence. On the day of the massacre on October 7th, when 1,200 Jews were killed in one day, she wrote, wait, you have to put their violence in context. To put it in context, there's a way to understand it. It's a response to Israel's aggression. This is the day of the massacre.
A few months back, Mrs. Albanese went to Piers Morgan in his show, and at a point she said this thing. This is almost 4 months ago. Something that I believe that is really bad to hear from an official in the UN.
Concluded that there was in June, that there was no evidence to support the claims of gang rape. But let's assume, I don't want to say anything that I've not investigated, so let's assume that rape occurred. So
7 days ago, even the UN chief distanced himself from Francesca Albanese after she endorsed violence, according to this video that I will show you now. And there is no question when someone embraces violence against journalists or anyone that conducts any investigation in a war. What we need to know is that the investigation and the journalists need to be free and show the absolute truth, something that is not happening from every social media. Everyone says something and then something else. It depends on what you watch. Especially the R is what is used in the vocabulary of Mrs. Albanese that never happened. Although the last few months we had many reports and from UN and from Israel and other sources that the R's did happen and Hamas used them as a war threat to the people of Israel.
Francesca Albanese, who continues to put the special rapporteur, weighed in recently on the attack on an Italian media outlet, which led to 30 arrests for vandalism. While she condemned the attack, she said that, quote, this should serve as a warning to journalists to go back to doing their job, end quote, which was condemned by a wide swath of the Italian political spectrum as basically an intimidation tactic on the press there. The Secretary General just stated yesterday, I believe, that journalists need to be protected from this kind of intimidation. Any thoughts from the SG or his office on the latest comments?
Well, I mean, as you know, the special rapporteurs will say what the special rapporteurs say. For the Secretary General, it is very clear that journalists should never come under any violence wherever they may be, whether that violence is physical or whether that violence is verbal, whether they are intimidated. Journalists need to be able to do their work freely, and they should never, ever be intimidated.
And we come in the last few weeks that we see Mrs. Albanese, that she's been sanctioned from US and not only them. We see that she was sanctioned and from Italy for what she was saying and the actions she took over the last few months.
Hey everyone, it's Hillel Neuer, and I have 3 exciting updates for you. First, UNRWA. On Friday, for the first time ever, Germany, Italy, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, and Latvia changed their votes at the United Nations and refused to support renewing UNRWA's mandate. Last time it was 27 EU countries voting for UNRWA's mandate. Now they withheld their support. Der Spiegel called it a remarkable political shift. The German foreign minister said it was because UNRWA was working with groups that are fomenting hostilities. This is after we appeared in the German parliament exposing UNRWA's terror ties, covered in the Berlin Morning Post, Neue Zürcher Zeitung, and other major newspapers. We got the truth out about UNRWA's terrorism. See it on our website, unwatch.org. Countries are now changing their votes. Second, Francesca Albanese, she was supposed to get awards in Torino, in Napoli, in Florence. They refused now. They've frozen initiatives to honor her. This is after we exposed her support for Hamas terrorism, and recently she endorsed violent attacks against journalists, the raid against the La Stampa news office. She endorsed the violence against the office, and now support for Francesca Albanese is frozen. She's getting condemned across Italy. Good news. And she's also complaining, crying every day how the sanctions turn her into a non-person. She can't use her credit card. She can't rent a hotel room anywhere. This is good news. It's a deterrent for those who support Hamas terrorism. Third, UN Watch, as you know, was just running our annual campaign to ensure further work holding abusers to account. We had an ambitious goal of $1 million. The campaign has ended. I'm happy to tell you we achieved 75% of our goal thanks to the incredible, generous support of people like you from around the world who gave to support UN Watch. We reached 75% for our goal. This is an incredible achievement. Thank you to everyone. Now, we still need to raise the remaining 25% to ensure more of our compelling reports exposing abuses by UNRWA, Albanese, many other UN bodies, to bring high-profile figures from Louay Ahmed, the son of Hamas, Rawan Osman, and human rights heroes to speak at the United Nations, to monitor the UN, to fight injustice, to keep going. If you haven't yet donated to UN Watch, please do so. Go to unwatch.org. You can support our work. Make sure that we get to fight supporters of terrorism, to fight anti-Semites, to fight abusers of human rights. Help us to make this world a better place. Support UN Watch. Tell your friends to support us. I know I can count on you. Thank you.
And we came into the last few days, especially yesterday. Mr. Noor published this video in the UN Watch. We watch live a different approach on the Palestinian issue. And what is that? UNRWA is in the United Nations Relief Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, funded during the first Nakba in 1948 Palestinian War. And we know that the organization has over 5 million refugees that are Palestinians. This is the latest report that we know from 2019. And this is what Mr. Noor said. After this clip, I found a really important news from Israel. Israel police raided UNRWA compound in the East Jerusalem and replaced the UN flag with an Israeli flag. That shows that something is changing in this part of the UN. Everything needs to be questioned, and if there is something that needs to be found, people need to see what happened after this investigation inside the UN and how some people used the United Nations to shape a different narrative. Thank you very much and see you soon. Be better.